His knuckles still bore the marks, 4 small crescents pressed into his skin by someone who never meant to leave a trace. Her name is Destiny Johnson, Black American, 29, one of the most sought-after crisis consultants in the world. She flies first class to Seoul with a briefcase full of strategy and a fear of flying she has never told anyone. He is already seated when she boards. Kang Seok-jin, the Iron Dragon, president of Grupo Kangjin, and something far more dangerous beneath that. A dragon tattoo climbs his left chest and shoulder. His bodyguards sit 3 rows behind him. He fills the seat beside her like a wall. Then the turbulence comes. Lights flicker. The aircraft drops. And Destiny Johnson, who does not panic, who does not ask for help, grabs his hand in the dark and does not let go. She grips so hard her nails leave marks in his skin. He doesn't pull away. He holds steady, tells her to breathe, and 2 hours later, she wakes up on his shoulder with the Seoul skyline waiting below. At the gate, she gives him only her name. He could find her in 20 minutes. He doesn't. 3 days later, a different room. She walks into a Seoul boardroom to manage a corporate crisis. The man at the head of the table is wearing a black onyx ring on his right hand and 4 small marks on his left. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The spreadsheet had been open for 40 minutes. Destiny hadn't touched it once. She told herself it was the seat. Too wide, too still, the kind of first-class quiet that had nothing to occupy her hands. She told herself it was the time zone math, the Seoul meeting starting Thursday morning, the acquisition contract she hadn't finished annotating. She told herself everything except the truth, which sat at 37,000 feet outside the oval window. She picked up her pen, clicked it, set it down, strolled to a paragraph she'd read 3 times already, and read it again without understanding a word. The man who settled into the seat beside her arrived without announcing himself. Dark suit, broad shoulders, the posture of someone accustomed to being the still point in a room. He adjusted nothing when he sat, just settled, opened a folder, read. A black onyx ring on his right hand caught the overhead light once and went dark. His 2 bodyguards took seats several rows back. She registered it all and returned to the screen. He said nothing to her. She said nothing to him. 11 minutes later, he glanced at her laptop. The cursor was exactly where it had been. She felt the glance, kept her eyes forward. The first tremor hit somewhere over the Pacific. A long, slow shudder, the kind the pilot would later call routine. Destiny closed the laptop, both feet flat on the floor. Hands in her lap, 4-count breath through the nose. Controlled, invisible. The man in the aisle seat watched her fingers find the armrest. They curled over the edge, knuckles pale, and stayed. "Are you okay?" "I'm perfectly fine." Too fast. She knew it the moment the words cleared her mouth. He returned to his folder, his eyes stayed on her. The intercom chimed. The captain's voice, measured, asked the crew to be seated. Outside, the wings shook once, hard. The cabin tilted. The lights cut out. 3 seconds of dark, of engines shifting pitch, of the floor dropping beneath her feet, in a way the body registers before the mind does. When the lights returned, the overhead bins were rattling, and a woman somewhere behind them had started to pray. Destiny's hand was around his. Her right hand crossed the armrest and seized his without deciding to. She gripped until her nails pressed in and held on, and she felt his stillness, absolute, like something load-bearing, before she felt the pressure of her own fingers. Behind her, movement. One of the bodyguards, rising. He raised 2 fingers, barely. The movement stopped. Her voice came out low. "I'm sorry. I just need to hold on to something." He turned his palm over beneath hers. "Then hold on." The plane lurched, sideways, A sickening lateral shift, and she leaned in, shoulder pressing against his arm, without choosing to. He kept still. No arm around her, no pull, no reach. Just his hand steady under hers, and the solid fact of him. Breathe with me. He counted. Slow. 1, 2, 3, 4. She followed it. The count filled the space where the panic had been. Inhale, exhale, his voice unhurried as if the shaking were happening somewhere else. The plane steadied eventually. The rattling stopped first, then the angle corrected, then the engines found their ordinary register again. The Pacific lay dark and flat outside. Her grip on his hand loosened but held, as if the loosening was all she could manage. He looked at their hands, looked away. There was a particular kind of stillness in that, and he stayed inside it. She fell asleep. 1 hour and 53 minutes. That's how long he sat completely still at 37,000 feet. A woman he'd met 2 hours earlier, asleep against his shoulder, her hand loose around his. A flight attendant paused once at his row, looked at him, moved on. He gave her nothing to act on. He waited. She woke to the sound of landing gear locking into place, still holding his hand. The marks registered before anything else did. 4 small crescents pressed into the back of his hand, deep, only now flushing red. She let go at once. My God, I hurt you. He looked at his hand. I've survived worse. The way he said it made plain this was not reassurance, just a fact. Somehow, that was worse. She pressed the call button, asked for ice, wrapped it in the linen napkin, and held it to the back of his hand with a precision that was entirely unnecessary, and she knew it. I'm sorry, she exhaled. Thank you. He waited. At least tell me your name. A pause, brief. Something shifting behind his eyes. Seok. Destiny Johnson. He repeated it slowly, finding the weight of each syllable. Destiny, she smiled, real, handed him the napkin, and stood as the plane pulled into the gate. By the time they reached the jet bridge, she was already ahead of him, carry-on over one shoulder, heels striking the floor in quick, even beats. At the terminal entrance, she stepped into the current of the crowd, and the current took her. Daehyun appeared at Seok's shoulder. Do you want me to find out where she's staying? Seok stood where he was, watching the place where she'd disappeared. No. Are you sure? She gave me only her name. He slid the ice-wrapped napkin into his coat pocket. She didn't give me permission to enter her life. He turned toward the exit. 3 days later, Seoul would take that choice out of both their hands. The boardroom on the 42nd floor smelled of cold air and expensive wood. Destiny set her documents on the table before anyone else arrived, a habit built over years of walking into rooms where no one expected her to stay. The executives filed in first, then lawyers. Then Park Dae-hyun, whose solid frame filled the doorway before he stepped aside. Then Kang Seok-jin. She knew the walk before she saw the face. That particular stillness, the way a man moves when every room he enters becomes his. Her eyes found his right hand. The marks were there, faint, but there. He saw her in the same instant. Neither of them moved while the executives kept talking. Nobody in the room noticed that 2 people had just stopped breathing. He took the head of the table. Miss Johnson. Mr. Kang. His eyes moved to her documents, her laptop, the coffee she hadn't touched, then back. Is your return flight booked? Not yet. Good, he said, it the way a man says something he has been rehearsing without knowing it. She filed the word under arrogance and opened her laptop. She requested full access, account records, internal contracts, shareholder communications, flagged transactions from the last 4 years. The directors shifted in their chairs. One of them started explaining what was and wasn't customarily available to external consultants. Seok kept his eyes on the table. She'll have access to whatever she requests. The director stopped talking. She noticed that two men at the far end of the table had gone very still when Seok spoke. Not the stillness of respect, something closer to relief, that the words hadn't been aimed at them. The investigation spread across 6 days like water finding cracks. She built the picture in layers: transaction flows, subsidiary structures, shell accounts folded inside holding companies with clean names and murky origins. The pattern wasn't obvious. It never was when someone smart had designed it. But patterns don't disappear because they're buried. They wait. On the third day, a carafe of coffee appeared in her team's workspace. No note, no name. The assistant said only that it had been arranged by the president's office. Destiny looked at the carafe for a moment, then told her team to drink. On the fourth day, she stayed past midnight cross-referencing a subsidiary chain. When she finally left the building, a car was waiting at the curb. Kangjin's, not a taxi. The driver offered no explanation. She took it anyway. She noticed, by day 5, that no helicopters landed on the rooftop pad while she was in the building. She had seen the landing schedule. She assumed maintenance. What she found on day 6 dismantled that assumption entirely. A subsidiary, 3 layers removed from Kangjin's public structure, receiving transfers that corresponded to no deliverable she could locate. Not consulting fees, not real estate. The amounts moved in irregular intervals that matched no contractual cycle, but matched each other. She cross-referenced the accounts, found 2 more, then 3. Someone was using Kangjin's corporate infrastructure as a channel. She sat alone in the workspace long after her team had gone, and the question she'd been avoiding sat directly in front of her. She heard his voice first, through a door she had no clearance to approach. She'd followed the sound of Daehyun's radio down a corridor, absent from her approved access map. The words were Korean, too fast for her limited vocabulary, but 3 landed clearly. Territories means payments. Baekryong. She had seen that name before, in one of the flag documents, obscured by a corporate alias, but traceable once you knew to look. She walked back to the elevator and pressed 42. Knocked on the door marked President, without waiting for an answer. He was alone, jacket off, the Seoul skyline behind him. He turned when she entered. "You are not only the president of this company." A beat. "No. You belong to Baekryong?" "I lead Baekryong." She held the silence long enough to understand what she was deciding. Then, "Everything they say about you is true. Some things. How many people have you hurt?" He looked at her without flinching. "More than I'd like, less than my enemies claim." She began gathering her documents from the chair where she'd set them. Her hands were steady. "I can't work for you. You don't work for me. You work for the board. That doesn't change who you are." She closed her laptop. He moved closer, stopped well short of her space. "And who do you believe I am?" "A man, surrounded by problems." "Is that enough for you to leave?" She met his eyes directly. "It's more than enough." She was already in bed when the lock disengaged. Not her keycard, a bypass. She was on her feet before the door opened, phone in hand, triggering the silent alarm she had set up on the first night. They were 2 men. They reached the hallway before Seok did. He was already there. She heard Daehyun's voice, then the particular silence that follows when a situation resolves before it requires explanation. Seok appeared in the doorway. She looked at him and understood immediately. "You were watching me. I was protecting you. Without telling me. If I had told you, you would have refused." "Exactly." She crossed her arms. "Because the choice was mine." He skipped the argument. He explained instead, the men worked for Hwayoung, Choi Tae-sung's organization, a rival that had been tracking her since she arrived because she was getting close to something it needed buried. She listened. When he finished, "You can't control my life because you're afraid of losing me." Silence. He looked out the window, then back. I'm not afraid of losing you. His voice dropped. I'm terrified. She saw it, the truth of it, unguarded for exactly 1 second before his expression closed. Then learn to feel fear without turning it into a prison for me. He held her gaze, then he nodded. By morning, the security detail was gone. No car at the curb, no figure on the floor above. He had complied completely. And completely was the word that kept returning to her. She told herself the quiet was better. She believed it for 3 days. On the 4th morning, she caught herself pausing at the hallway before leaving, not scanning for threats, but for someone she already knew was gone, registering his absence the way you register a sound that has stopped, only once the room is already too quiet to ignore. Marcus Reed walked into her office on a Tuesday, as if Seoul were a city he'd always meant to visit. He stood in the doorway with that easy stance, shoulders loose, hands in his pockets, and smiled like no time had passed at all. Destiny kept her eyes on her screen. You have 5 minutes. He sat anyway. He asked about the work, the client, the Korean food. Then halfway through the 2nd minute, she heard it. We could go back to New York, you know. This contract isn't going anywhere. She wrote it in the margin of the document she was already annotating. He kept talking. This isn't really you, Destiny. You're better than a dead-end audit in a city that doesn't speak your language, he said. You should know. Twice before the 5 minutes were up. Each time, she nodded. Each time, she nodded. Each time, she nodded. She kept her expression neutral. She showed him to the door. She stood at the window after he left and watched the street below. He moved through it easily, that ease she'd once found reliable. Now she was just logging it. The financial records kept her at the office past midnight. She had been tracing a series of shell transactions, payments routed through 4 intermediary accounts before landing inside Kangjin's operating budget. The architecture was flawless, built to look like an internal decision. SOX authorization codes appeared on every transfer. Except, she pulled the signature timestamps against the building's access logs. On 3 of the 4 authorization dates, SOX credentials had been used from 2 different IP addresses, simultaneously. The forgery was elegant. Whoever built it knew Kangjin's internal systems well enough to replicate the access patterns. But they missed one thing. She sat back in her chair. The room hummed with the building's ventilation and nothing else. Someone had engineered this. The trail was too clean, the timing too deliberate. She cross-referenced the dates against Kangjin's board meeting schedule and found 3 intersections. She thought about Marcus, the questions he'd asked, casually, while pretending to look out at the Han River, had been precise. What stage is the audit at? Do they have external records or just internal? The kind of specific that doesn't come from curiosity. She saved her work. She encrypted the file. She moved the backup to a cloud drive she hadn't used in 3 years, registered under a different name. Then she went back to the original folder on the office server and deleted nothing. They came at 11:47. She heard the elevator before the door opened. 3 men, moving fast, and one more already behind her before she could reach her phone. The office lights were still on. Someone would see them from the street, she told herself, and then the hood came down and she stopped telling herself anything. The drive was 40 minutes. She counted the turns. The warehouse sat near Incheon Port. She knew from the salt in the air, the low percussion of container ships somewhere close, the way sound moved differently inside. High ceiling, concrete floor, metal walls. A crate near the left wall had a number painted in yellow, 7C. She filed it. Choi Tae-sung was already there when they removed the hood. He stood 10 meters away, hands folded behind his back, watching her the way a man watches something he already owns. Miss Johnson. His English was precise. I've heard your work is exceptional. She said nothing. He walked closer. He explained, without raising his voice, without any gesture toward the men flanking her, that she was not in danger, that she was, in his words, a clarifying instrument, that Kang Seok-jin had a habit of choosing ambition over wisdom, and sometimes wisdom needed a louder voice. He let the silence absorb that before continuing. He offered her a phone. She heard Suk answer on the second ring. His voice was flat, stripped of everything except attention. Tae-sung spoke once. Abandon the legalization filing. Publicly. Permanently. A pause. Then Suk said, "What else?" Tae-sung smiled at nothing. He told Suk he'd have an answer by morning. The call ended. Tae-sung gave the phone back to the nearest guard and walked toward a side room without looking at her again. She stood against the wall and watched the men. There were 7, 2 clustered near the main door, younger, nervous, checking their phones. 3 more near the far end. The last 2 were Tae-sung's inner circle, standing apart from the others in a way that spoke clearly. They shared a different chain of command. She had 20 minutes before they settled into routine. She looked at the man closest to her, mid-30s, tactical jacket, a jaw that clenched every time one of the door guards moved. She waited until the far group laughed at something. Then she said, very quietly, Park told them about the Gwangju transfer. The man's jaw stopped moving. She turned her head away. 15 minutes later, the 2 factions were no longer making eye contact. She caught fragments she wasn't supposed to hear. Who told him? When did Park talk to? Does Tae-sung know? The guard nearest the side wall was distracted. His phone was on his belt. She moved toward crate 7C, sat down as if her legs were tired, and when he stepped away to argue with someone, she lifted the phone in 3 seconds flat. She typed to Minji in fragments. Port Warehouse, Incheon 7C Salt Air, Container Ship South Side. I'm fine. Don't call back. She deleted the thread, replaced the phone. Whether it had sent, she couldn't tell. She sat against the crate and breathed through her nose and calculated what she had. 1 planted rumor, spreading through a room. 1 message, somewhere between her and Minji. And 7 men who no longer fully trusted each other. It wasn't enough. It might be. The first sound was boots on concrete. Destiny pressed herself against the steel column, still clutching the phone, as shouting erupted from the far end of the warehouse. Tae-sung's men scattered toward the doors. 2 fell before they reached the exits. She heard the impact before she understood what it was. Dae-hyun moving through the space like something forged for exactly this. Seok came in after him. No drawn weapon, no raised voice. He walked through the chaos and found Tae-sung standing at the center of it, credit to the man, not running. You see, Tae-sung said, gesturing toward Marcus, who stood frozen near the wall, even her own past worked for me. He said it like a triumph. But the room had already shifted. Destiny looked at Marcus, really looked, and the shape of it assembled itself in one cold moment. The missed calls, the borrowed notes, the months of proximity dressed as love. Marcus met her eyes for half a second, then looked away. That was enough. Seok watched Tae-sung the way men watch a settled problem. Calm, complete. It's over, he said. Tae-sung laughed. A short, brittle sound. He reached for the gun at his side. Seok's hand moved faster. 1 motion, clean and final. The weapon skidded across the floor. Tae-sung stood disarmed, his cream suit unchanged, his composure cracking beneath it. The choice hung in the air for exactly 3 seconds. Then Seok made it. Dae-hyun made a call. 3 minutes later, the sound of sirens reached the water outside. As the authorities entered and swept the space, Tae-sung was guided toward the door. He stopped just short of it. He turned to Destiny, one last effort, the kind of man who cannot exit without a mark. Men like him don't change, he said. She held his gaze. Maybe some don't, but he gave me the freedom to leave. She let a beat pass. You never gave anyone a choice. Taesung was taken out. Marcus followed, wrists bound, silent. The warehouse emptied to almost nothing. Seok stood a few feet from her. He noticed. She still had the phone in her hand, the message thread open, Min-ji's name at the top. He looked at it. He understood everything without being told. He kept quiet, but for a moment, standing in that ruined space, that silence was its own kind of language. The weeks that followed were quiet for Destiny, loud for everyone else. She read about it in 3 different publications before she let herself believe it. Seok had handed over the full evidence package, not just Taesung's network, his own. Baekryong's ledgers, dated transactions, names she suspected even he had worked years to protect. The documents destroyed contracts, ended partnerships, pulled the financial ground out from under a structure he had spent 2 decades building. Men who had called him brother called him a traitor in the same breath. He accepted it, paid the lawyers without flinching, sold property when the accounts shrank, no statements, no appeals for credit. She knew because Min-ji told her. She knew because she had been watching, quietly, from the distance she had chosen. He did it because he understood that a man cannot open a door with the same hands that built a cage. That was the thing she turned over in her mind the most. At Incheon, Seok stood with her at the gate. Daehyun waited 20 steps back, giving them the space. Seok held out a small black box. She opened it. The onyx ring sat against dark velvet. She had seen it on his hand every day since Seoul. The symbol of Baekryong, the symbol of what he had been. "This belonged to the man I needed to be to survive," he said. She looked up. "And who do you need to be now?" "A man who doesn't turn love into a prison." She closed her fingers around the box and slid it into her carry-on. Not a word about staying. He walked with her to the point where he couldn't go further, and stopped. She looked at him once, that look that has no translation, the kind that lives below words, and she walked through the gate. He watched until she disappeared. Weeks passed. He rebuilt what he could. He started smaller. He let some things stay broken. He learned, slowly, that there are structures you dismantle and structures you build from different materials. He was still learning the difference. Then the message came. "I have a flight to Seoul tomorrow. The seat next to me is empty." He bought the ticket in 4 minutes. The plane hit turbulence somewhere over the Pacific. Light, rhythmic, the kind that makes the overhead lights tremble and passengers grip their armrests. Destiny closed her eyes. She breathed slowly, once, twice, counting the exhale. Seok kept his hands still. He rested one open on the armrest between them, palm up, waiting with no expectation. She opened her eyes. She looked at his hand. She thought about the first flight, how her fingers had locked around his in the dark without thinking, all instinct and fear. She interlaced her fingers with his. Deliberate, chosen. "Afraid?" he asked. "Very." "Wanna go back?" "No." She turned toward the window. Below the clouds, the lights of Seoul were appearing. Scattered at first, then dense, a whole city emerging from the dark. "I want to continue." His hand closed around hers. "Then, we continue together." Outside, Seoul grew brighter. The clouds parted. The plane descended toward it steadily, without hesitation. Some journeys don't end at the destination. They begin there. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever felt safe in the grip of someone the world warned you to fear? And do you know the difference between a man who protects you because he loves you and one who protects you because he wants to own you? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about trust, danger, and love, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.